Transport ship Horizon's Promise slowed down as it approached the massive space station. Inside the ship, 5 young humans pressed their faces against the windows. They had traveled for 3 weeks to reach the Galactic Military Academy, and now they could finally see it. The station was enormous. It stretched across the darkness of space like a silver city. With thousands of lights blinking in every direction, Alina Vasquez took a deep breath. She was 22 years old and had been chosen to lead this small group of cadets. Back on Earth, she had lost her older brother in a war. That loss had taught her something important. She understood that fighting was sometimes necessary, but peace was always better. Now she was about to enter a place where 2 alien empires had been at war for over 800 years. The other cadets stood beside her. Marcus Chen was quiet and thoughtful. He loved machines and could solve problems that others could not even understand. Amara Okonkwo had a special gift. She could remember everything she ever read or heard, and she already spoke 7 Earth languages. Jimmy Kowalski was the youngest at 20 years old. He loved history and believed that understanding the past could help prevent future mistakes. Priya Sharma was trained as a medic. She could read emotions in people's faces, even alien faces. She cared deeply about helping others. The ship docked with a soft bump. The doors opened, and the 5 humans stepped onto the station platform. Immediately, they felt hundreds of eyes turned toward them. Aliens of all shapes and sizes stopped what they were doing and stared. Some whispered to each other. Alina heard the word repeated again and again. Deathworlders Earth was classified as a Category 7 Death World. This meant that the conditions on Earth were considered extremely dangerous. The gravity was heavy. The weather was violent. Diseases were everywhere. Predators hunted in every environment. To most aliens in the galaxy, the fact that humans had survived on such a planet made them either terrifying or fascinating. A tall alien with pale blue skin and 4 arms approached them. His uniform showed that he was a high-ranking officer. His name was Commander Theories, and he was from the Velnorex Empire. He looked at the humans with cold eyes. "Oh, these are the Deathworlders," he said. His voice carried no warmth. "Follow me. Try not to break anything." The cadets exchanged glances, but said nothing. They followed Commander Theories through the station. He walked fast, and they had to hurry to keep up. He showed them to their quarters, which were located in the oldest part of the station. The rooms were small, and the equipment was outdated. It was clear that they were not welcome here. Over the next few days, the humans learned about life at the academy. Cadets from dozens of species trained here together. They learned military tactics, engineering, communications, and medicine. But there was something strange about this place. 2 species dominated the academy, the Velnorex and the Kelith, and they hated each other. The war between the Velnorex Empire and the Kelith. Dominion had lasted for 847 years. Every day at the academy, there was a moment of silence called the Memorial Moment. During this time, cadets from both sides honored their war dead. Alina watched these ceremonies carefully. She noticed that the tension between the 2 groups was incredible. They would not look at each other. They would not speak to each other. They acted as if the other side did not exist. But Alina noticed something else, too. The words used in both memorial ceremonies were almost identical. Both sides spoke of sacrifice. Both sides spoke of honor. Both sides spoke of an enemy that could never be forgiven. It was like watching a mirror. Despite warnings to stay away from the enemy species, the human cadets began making friends. Priya helped a Kelith cadet named Sorvan when he had a medical emergency. He had an allergic reaction to something in the food, and Priya knew exactly what to do. After that day, Sorvan trusted her completely. Marcus connected with a Velnorex engineering student named Alith. They both loved taking machines apart and putting them back together. They spent hours in the engineering labs, talking about designs and ideas. Jimmy spent most of his free time in the Academy's historical archives. He was researching the war for a class assignment, but the more he read, the more confused he became. The official records did not make sense. There were gaps in the timeline. Key dates did not match. Important documents seemed to be missing. He brought his findings to Alina, Something is wrong with the history, Jimmy said. The story of how this war started has holes in it. Big holes. Alina looked at the documents he had gathered. She was not a historian, but even she could see that things did not add up. Keep digging, she told him, but be careful. One evening, the human cadets sat at a dinner table with cadets from several different species. The conversation was polite but distant. Then Jimmy asked a simple question. He did not mean to cause trouble. He was just curious. Does anyone actually remember why this war started? The table went silent. Every alien stopped eating. They stared at Jimmy as if he had said something forbidden. Finally, an older Kelith cadet spoke. It does not matter why, he said. The war simply is. It has always been. It will always be. The other aliens nodded in agreement. The conversation moved on to other topics, but the human cadets could not forget what had just happened. A question that should have had a simple answer had been treated like something dangerous. That night, Alina gathered her team in their small quarters. Jimmy had discovered something important. The war's origin story existed in two completely different versions. The Velnorix version blamed the Kelith for a surprise attack. The Kelith version blamed the Velnorix for the same thing. But when Jimmy looked at the fragmentary records from that actual time period, neither version matched what really happened. Someone buried the truth, Jimmy said. A long time ago, someone made sure that no one would ever know how this war really started. Marcus leaned forward. But why? Why would anyone do that? I do not know yet, Jimmy admitted. But I am going to find out. Lena looked at her team. They were young. They were far from home. They were surrounded by aliens who did not trust them. But they had stumbled onto something that no one had questioned for over 800 years. Everyone in this galaxy had accepted that the war was eternal. Everyone had stopped asking why. Everyone except 5 humans who had just arrived from a death world. Humans who had not yet learned that some questions were not supposed to be asked. We need to find out what really happened, Alina said. If this war is based on a lie, then millions of people are dying for nothing. We have to know the truth. The others nodded. They did not fully understand what they were getting into. They did not know how dangerous their questions would become. But they were humans from Earth. They had evolved on a planet that tried to kill them every single day. They were not afraid of difficult truths. And so, for the first time in 847 years, someone began searching for the real reason the war had started. 5 young cadets from a death world were about to change everything. 3 weeks had passed since the human cadets began their secret investigation. They had learned to be careful. They did not discuss their research in public places. They met in maintenance corridors and abandoned storage rooms where no one could hear them. They pretended to be ordinary students while they searched for answers that had been hidden for centuries. Alina kept the team focused. Every night, they shared what they had learned. Jimmy continued to dig through historical records. Marcus looked for technical evidence. Amara studied the languages and communication patterns of both empires. Priya watched the people around them, looking for anyone who might know more than they were saying, but they were not as invisible as they thought. Sorvan, the Kelith cadet that Priya had saved, noticed their strange behavior. So did Ilith, the Velnorix engineer who had become friends with Marcus. One day, they cornered the humans in an empty lab. We know you are hiding something, Sorvan said. We have watched you sneaking around for weeks. What are you doing? Alina looked at her team. This was a dangerous moment. If Sorvan and Alith reported them, their investigation would end. But Alina also saw something in their eyes. They were not angry. They were curious. She made a decision. She told them everything. At first, Sorvan and Ilith did not believe it. The war was all they had ever known. Their families had fought in it for generations. The idea that the entire conflict might be based on lies was too big to accept. But Jimmy showed them the evidence. The gaps in the historical records. The 2 different origin stories that could not both be true. The missing documents from the time period when the war began. Alith stared at the data for a long time. I always felt that something was wrong, she finally said. My grandmother used to tell stories about the old days. She said there was a time when Velnorix and Kelith were not enemies. But everyone told her she was confused. Sorvan nodded slowly. My people have similar stories. Tales of a time before the war. But they are dismissed as myths. They might not be myths, Elena said. They might be memories of the truth. From that moment, Sorvan and Alahith joined the investigation. Having allies from both sides of the war made everything easier. They could access places the humans could not go. They could ask questions without raising suspicion. Marcus discovered something important. The Academy had a sealed archive section that contained records from before the war. Access was restricted to admirals and other high-ranking officers. Normal cadets could not enter. But Marcus was an engineer. He studied the security systems and found a weakness. "I can get us in," he said. "But we will only have about 7 minutes before the system resets and detects the intrusion." They made a plan. Jimmy and Amara would create a distraction by triggering a false alarm in another part of the station. While security was busy, Marcus, Alina, and Sorvan would enter the sealed archive. They would copy as many files as possible and get out before anyone knew they were there. The plan worked. The alarm drew attention away from the archive section. Marcus disabled the door lock. They rushed inside and found themselves surrounded by ancient data storage devices. These records had not been accessed in hundreds of years. Elena's heart pounded as Marcus connected his device and began copying files. The seconds ticked by. 5 minutes. 6 minutes. Finally, the download completed. They slipped out of the archive just as the security system came back online. That night, they gathered in their secret meeting place and opened the files. What they found changed everything. 847 years ago, the Velnorks and the Keleth were not enemies. They were about to become allies. The two empires had negotiated for decades to form a union. Together, they would have been the most powerful force in the entire quadrant. The alliance was scheduled to be signed in just 3 days, but it never happened. 3 days before the signing, a devastating attack struck Velnorik's territory. Thousands died. The attackers were identified as Keleth warships. The Velnoriks demanded justice. The Keleth denied responsibility. Within weeks, the alliance was forgotten, and war had begun. "But look at this," Jimmy said, pointing to a file buried deep in the archive. It was a technical report from a Velnorix investigator. The report had been sealed and classified immediately after it was written. According to the investigator, the energy signatures of the attacking ships did not match Keleth's technology. They matched something else entirely. Sindari technology. The name appeared again and again in the hidden files. The Sindari Collective was a species that manufactured weapons. They sold to anyone who would buy. If the Velnorix and Keleth had formed an alliance, the Sindari would have lost their 2 biggest customers. Peace would have destroyed their business, so they destroyed the peace. Dead, the original attack had been carried out by Sindari ships disguised as Keleth vessels. They had painted their hulls in Keleth colors and used stolen identification codes. The Velnorks had been tricked into believing their future allies had betrayed them. The Keleth had been blamed for something they did not do. And for 847 years, both sides had been fighting a war that was built on a lie. The Sindari had sold weapons to both empires for centuries. They had grown rich and powerful while millions died. The room was silent as everyone absorbed this truth. Sorvan looked sick. Alith had tears in her eyes. Even Commander Theories, who they did not know had been watching them, seemed shaken. He stepped out of the shadows. The cadets jumped to their feet in alarm. "I followed you from the archive," Theories said. His voice was different now. The coldness was gone. "I suspected you were up to something. I planned to report you and have you expelled, and now?" Alina asked. Thyres looked at the evidence displayed on the screens. His father had died in this war. His grandfather had died in this war. He had devoted his entire life to fighting an enemy that had never been his enemy at all. "Now I do not know what to do," he admitted. "If this gets out, the Sindari will not be happy. Do you understand what you have found? They have controlled this war for 8 centuries. They have informants everywhere, agents in both empires. They will not let you expose them. Will you help us?" Alina asked. Thyres was quiet for a long moment. His entire world had just collapsed. Everything he believed had been a lie. But he was an honorable man. He could not ignore the truth simply because it was painful. Yes, he said, I will help you. But you must understand the danger. The Sindari have killed to protect this secret before. They will kill again. That night, Amara was monitoring communications as she often did. She had learned to recognize patterns in the data flowing through the station. Something caught her attention. A coded transmission had been sent from inside the academy to a location outside Velnorix and Keleth. Space. She decoded the message with growing horror. Someone had reported their activities. The transmission described the human cadets and their investigation. It mentioned the archive breach. It mentioned everything. The message had been sent to the Sindari Collective. Amara rushed to tell the others. When they heard the news, fear spread through the group. They were no longer just students asking questions. They were targets. The Sindari knew about them now. And the Sindari did not leave loose ends. Alina looked at her team. They were scared. So was she. But they had come too far to stop now. We have the truth, she said. Now, we need to figure out how to share it with the galaxy before the Sindari can stop us. Outside their hiding place, the station continued its normal routines. Cadets went to classes. Ships came and went. The war continued as it had for centuries. But something had changed. 5 humans and their unlikely allies now carried a secret that could end everything. The only question was whether they would live long enough to tell anyone. The attack came without warning. Marcus was alone in his quarters, reviewing the stolen files on his personal device. He heard a soft humming sound behind him. When he turned around, he saw a maintenance drone hovering in the doorway. Its lights were blinking in an unusual pattern. Something felt wrong. Marcus started to move, but he was not fast enough. The drone suddenly accelerated toward him, its cutting tools extended. It was trying to kill him. Marcus threw himself to the side. The drone slammed into the wall where his head had been a moment before. It spun around and came at him again. Marcus grabbed a chair and used it as a shield. The drone's cutting tools sliced through the metal like paper. The door burst open. Alith rushed in with a heavy tool from the engineering lab. She swung it at the drone with all her strength. The impact sent the machine crashing to the floor. It sparked and twitched for a moment, then went still. Marcus was breathing hard. His hands were shaking. It tried to kill me, he said. A maintenance drone tried to kill me. Alith examined the broken machine. This was not a malfunction, she said. Someone reprogrammed it. Someone wanted you dead. The message was clear. Stop investigating or die. The group gathered in their secret meeting place. The attack on Marcus had shaken all of them. For the first time, they discussed abandoning their mission. The Sindari were too powerful. The risk was too great. Maybe they should just forget what they had learned and go back to being ordinary cadets. Alina listened to their fears. She understood them. She was scared too. But then she thought about what would happen if they stopped. Oh shit, if we quit now, she said, the war continues forever. How many more people will die? How many more families will lose someone they love? We have the truth. We might be the only ones who can end this. Priya nodded slowly. She is right. We cannot unsee what we have seen. We cannot unknow what we know. One by one, the others agreed. They would continue. But they would have to be much more careful. Commander Thyres helped them disappear. He filed paperwork saying that the human cadets were on a special training exercise in a remote part of the station. In reality, he moved them to a decommissioned section that had been abandoned for decades. No one would look for them there. They spent hours debating their next move. They had evidence, but evidence alone was not enough. The Sindari would claim that the documents were forgeries. Both empires had believed the lie for so long that they might reject the truth simply because it was too painful to accept. We need something undeniable, Marcus said. Something that proves the Sindari are still involved today, not just 800 years ago. Amara had been studying the files from the archive. She looked up with excitement in her eyes. I found something, she said. Communication codes. These are Sindari command codes from when the war started. They used these codes to coordinate the false flag attack. How does that help us now? Sorvin asked. Amara smiled. Because certain code structures are still in use today. If we can show that the Sindari are still using these same codes to communicate with agents in both empires, it proves that the manipulation never stopped. Jimmy had been quiet, lost in thought. Now he spoke up. I have studied human history my whole life, he said. We have seen situations like this before. Wars that everyone thought would never end. Conflicts that seemed eternal. And you know what? They ended. Sometimes in a single day. How? Alith asked. When the truth came out, Jimmy said, when people learned that they had been lied to, everything changed. People do not want to fight and die for a lie. We just have to show them that they have been. Sorvin stood up and began pacing. There is an event coming up, he said. Ceasefire Day. It happens once a year. High commanders from both the Velnorks and the Kelith meet at the Academy for a ceremony. It is the only time when leaders from both sides are in the same room. If we could present the evidence there, Alina said slowly, both empires would see it at the same time. Neither side could suppress it. The plan began to take shape. They would prepare a presentation containing all their evidence. On Ceasefire Day, they would find a way to broadcast it to everyone at the ceremony. Both empires would learn the truth together. But Ceasefire Day was still 2 weeks away. Priya had been monitoring everyone's health during their time in hiding. She was worried. The stress was affecting all of them, but Commander Thyres was struggling the most. He had spent his entire life believing in the war. His father and grandfather had died fighting it. Accepting that their deaths had been meaningless, that the whole war was based on a lie, was destroying him. We need to remember something, Priya said to the group. We are not just exposing a lie. We are asking billions of people to rebuild their entire understanding of reality. If we do this wrong, it could cause chaos. We have to approach this with compassion, not just truth, Lena agreed. When we show the evidence, we cannot be angry or accusatory. We need to help people understand. We need to give them hope, not just pain. The plan was solid. 2 more weeks of preparation, and they would change history. Then everything fell apart. Alith received a message from her family on the Velnorik's homeworld. Her younger sister had been conscripted into the military. This happened sometimes when the war needed more soldiers. Alith's sister was only 19 years old. She had never wanted to fight, but that was not the worst part. Alith's sister was being deployed to the front lines. A major offensive was planned. She would ship out in 3 days. Alith's hands trembled as she read the message. She is going to die, she whispered. They are sending her into the worst fighting. She has no experience. She will not survive. The room went quiet. Everyone knew what this meant. They could not wait for Ceasefire Day. The offensive would happen before then. Thousands would die on both sides. Alith's sister might be one of them. We have to move faster, Elena said. Marcus shook his head. If we rush this, we might fail. We only get one chance. We do not have a choice, Alith said. Her voice was desperate. My sister is going to die for a lie. So are thousands of others. We cannot let that happen. Lena looked around at her team. They were exhausted. They were scared. They were far from ready. But they could not wait while innocent people died in a war that should never have existed. How long until the offensive begins? Alina asked. The fleets will engage in less than 72 hours, Commander Therese said. If we are going to act, it has to be now. Lena made her decision. Then we act now. We find a way to broadcast the truth to both fleets before they start killing each other. How? Amara asked. The fleets are in space. We are stuck on this station. Thyres thought for a moment. Both flagships are currently in orbit around the Academy station, preparing for the offensive. If we could get aboard both ships and access their broadcast systems, we could transmit the evidence to every vessel in both fleets simultaneously. It was insane. It was almost certainly impossible. But it was their only option. We split into 2 teams, Elena said. One team boards the Velnorik's flagship. The other boards the Keleth command vessel. We broadcast at exactly the same moment. Sorvon looked at the Velnorix members of their group. I am Keleth. If I am caught on a Velnorix ship, they will execute me as a spy. I know, Alina said. I am not going to order anyone to do this. It has to be your choice. Sorvon was quiet for a long moment. Then he straightened his shoulders. Alith's sister is about to die for nothing. Millions of people have died for nothing. If I can help stop that, the risk is worth it. Alith reached out and gripped his hand. They were from species that had been enemies for 8 centuries. But in that moment, they were simply 2 people who refused to let a lie continue. We do this together, Eilith said. Alina looked at her team. Humans, Velnorix, and Keleth, united by a common purpose. They were about to attempt something impossible. Get some rest, she said. Tomorrow, we end an 800-year war. No one slept much that night. They all knew that some of them might not survive what was coming. But they also knew that they could not live with themselves if they did not try. The truth had been buried for too long. It was time to dig it up. The day arrived with a heaviness that everyone could feel. In 12 hours, the Velnorix and Keleth fleets would begin their offensive. Thousands would die. Elith's sister would be among the soldiers fighting on the front lines, unless the truth could be revealed before then. Alina gathered the team one final time. They reviewed the plan. Commander Therius had obtained maintenance credentials that would allow them to board both flagships. The ships were preparing for battle, which meant security would be focused outward, watching for enemy attacks, not inward for infiltrators. Remember, Alina said, we broadcast at exactly the same moment. Both fleets need to see the evidence simultaneously. If only one side sees it first, they might think it is enemy propaganda. The team divided into 2 groups. Alina, Marcus, and Sorvin would infiltrate the Velnorix flagship. Jimmy, Amara, Alith, and Commander Therius would board the Keleth command vessel. Each team carried a copy of all the evidence they had gathered. Whatever happens, Priya said before they separated, I am proud of all of you. We came here as strangers. We became a family. No one had dry eyes after that. They embraced quickly and went their separate ways. Elena's team approached the Velnorix flagship in a small maintenance shuttle. The massive warship loomed before them, bristling with weapons that would soon be pointed at the Keleth. Marcus piloted the shuttle into a service bay while Alina watched for any sign that they had been detected. Sorvon sat in the back, wearing a Velnorix maintenance uniform. His heart was pounding. He was a Keleth, walking onto an enemy warship. If anyone recognized what he truly was, he would be killed immediately. But he thought of Alith's sister and all the other young soldiers about to die for nothing. His fear could not be greater than their lives. They landed without incident. The service bay was busy with technicians preparing the ship for battle. No one looked twice at 3 more workers in maintenance uniforms. They moved quickly through the corridors. Following the route Marcus had memorized from stolen ship schematics, the broadcast center was located deep within the ship. They had to pass through multiple security checkpoints. Each time, Alina felt her heart stop. Each time their credentials worked and they were waved through. Meanwhile, on the Keleth command vessel, Jimmy's team faced their own challenges. Alith's presence helped them board without suspicion. She was Velnorix, but she was also a registered Academy cadet. And the Keleth allowed neutral parties on their ship for inspections during the ceasefire period. Commander Therius took the lead. His military bearing and confident manner convinced the guards that everything was routine. Amara stayed close to Jimmy, ready to use her language skills if they needed to talk their way out of trouble. They reached the Keleth broadcast room after 30 tense minutes of walking through enemy territory. Jimmy began setting up the equipment to transmit their evidence. His hands were steady despite his fear. He had trained for this moment his entire life, even though he had not known it until now. Back on the Velnorix flagship, Elena's team reached the broadcast center. Marcus immediately went to work connecting their device to the ship's communication systems. The broadcast center was staffed by 2 technicians who barely glanced at the newcomers. Everyone was focused on the coming battle. Then everything went wrong. An alarm began to wail. Red lights flashed throughout the ship. A voice announced over the speakers that unauthorized personnel had been detected. Someone had recognized Sorvin. Guards burst into the broadcast center with weapons drawn. They pointed directly at Sorvin. "Keleth spy," one of them shouted. "Do not move." Alina stepped forward, her hands raised. "Wait. Please listen. We are not here to hurt anyone. We have information that could end the war." Silence. The guard commander aimed his weapon at her head. "You brought an enemy agent onto this ship. You will all be executed." Marcus had not stopped working. His fingers flew across the controls as the guards argued with Alina. He had prepared for this possibility. He had created a dead man's switch. If he was captured or killed, the broadcast would transmit automatically. He activated the switch. At the same moment, on the Keleth command vessel, Jimmy's team faced their own disaster. The broadcast room had gone into emergency lockdown. Metal barriers slammed down over the doors and windows. They were trapped. "We cannot transmit," Alith said desperately. "The lockdown has cut all our connections." Jimmy refused to accept defeat. He had studied every system on this ship during their preparation. He knew there was another way. "The emergency broadcast system," he said. "It is designed to work even during lockdown. It is meant for distress calls. If I can reroute our signal through that system, it will reach every ship in the fleet. Can you do it?" Amara asked. "I do not know," Jimmy admitted. "But I have to try." He began working on the ship's systems, attempting something the Keleth engineers had never designed them to do. Commander Therese stood guard at the sealed door, knowing that security forces would eventually cut through. The minutes passed with agonizing slowness. On the Velnorix flagship, Marcus was on his knees with a weapon pressed against his head. But the dead man's switch had worked. Across the ship, screens flickered. The regular programming was interrupted. The evidence began to play. Soldiers stopped what they were doing. Officers turned to watch. The entire crew saw the original Sindari communications from 800 years ago. They saw the technical reports proving that the first attack had not come from the Keleth. They saw the evidence of centuries of manipulation. The guard commander watched with growing horror. His weapon slowly lowered from Marcus's head as he absorbed what he was seeing. "This cannot be true," he whispered. "It is true," Alina said quietly. "Every record we found confirms it. The Sindari started this war to profit from weapons sales. Your people and the Keleth have been fighting each other for 8 centuries because of a lie." On the Keleth command vessel, Jimmy finally broke through. The emergency broadcast system came alive. Their evidence flooded out to every Keleth ship in the fleet. Soldiers and officers across the Armada watched the same footage that the Velnorix were seeing. The lockdown doors opened. Keleth security forces poured in, ready to arrest the intruders. But they too had seen the broadcast. They stood frozen, their weapons half raised, their certainty shattered. "High Marshal Tethan," the supreme commander of the Keleth fleet, pushed through the security forces. She was ancient by Keleth standards, with scars from 50 years of war. She had lost her husband and 2 children to this conflict. She had devoted her entire life to destroying the Velnorix. She looked at the screens still showing the evidence. Then she looked at the small group of cadets and their Velnorix allies. "Is this real?" she demanded. "Tell me the truth. Is this real?" Commander Therese stepped forward. He was Velnorix, addressing the leader of his people's greatest enemy. "It is real, High Marshal. I have verified every document myself. My father died in this war. My grandfather died in this war. I would not lie about something like this." The High Marshal stood motionless for a long moment. Then she did something no one expected. She laughed. It was not a happy laugh. It was the sound of someone who had just realized that everything they believed was wrong. 800 years, she said. 800 years of death. All because of a lie. She turned to her communications officer. "Open a channel to the Velnorix flagship. I want to speak with Admiral Corvus directly." Across the silent void of space, 2 fleets hung motionless. Not a single weapon had been fired. Every soldier on every ship was watching their screens, trying to understand what they had just learned. Then Admiral Corvus of the Velnorix appeared on the screens of the Kelith command vessel. At the same moment, High Marshal Tethan appeared on the screens of the Velnorix flagship. For the first time in 847 years, the leaders of both fleets looked at each other not as enemies, but as victims of the same crime. "You have seen the evidence," Corvus said. His voice was rough with emotion. "I have," Tethan replied. "It appears we have both been deceived. What do we do now?" The High Marshal looked at the young cadets who had risked everything to bring them the truth. Humans, Velnorix, and Kelith standing together. If they could find common ground, perhaps there was hope for everyone. "Now," she said, "we talk. For the first time in 8 centuries, we talk." The offensive was cancelled. The weapons powered down. The soldiers who had been prepared to kill and die for a lie stood down from their battle stations, and in the broadcast centers of both flagships, a small group of cadets watched as history changed direction. They had done the impossible. They had stopped a war that everyone believed would never end, but Alina knew this was only the beginning. Ending the fighting was one thing. Building peace would be much harder. The real work was just starting. 72 hours had passed since the broadcast. In that time, not a single shot had been fired between the Velnorix and Kelith fleets. For the first time in 847 years, the guns had fallen silent. Alith's sister was safe. Her deployment had been suspended along with all other military operations. She had sent Aleth a message filled with confusion and relief. She did not fully understand what had happened, but she knew that she was not going to die today. That was enough. Across 2 great empires, billions of people gathered around screens to watch something that had never happened before. Joint peace talks between the Velnorix and the Kelith were being broadcast publicly for everyone to see. Leaders who had spent their entire lives as enemies now sat across from each other at a table, trying to find a way forward. The human cadets watched from a small room near the conference hall. They had been given a place of honor, but they preferred to stay out of the spotlight. They had not done this for glory. They had done it because it was right. The Sindari Collective had gone completely silent. Their representatives had fled from council space within hours of the broadcast. Their communication networks had gone dark. Investigations were already beginning into their centuries of war profiteering. It would take years to fully understand the extent of their manipulation. But their power was broken. Not everyone was happy about the peace. Alina had expected this, but it was still difficult to witness. Entire industries had existed to supply the war. Weapons manufacturers, shipbuilders, military contractors. Millions of jobs depended on the conflict continuing. Those workers were now terrified about their futures. Veterans gathered in angry crowds outside the academy. Some of them had lost limbs in the war. Others had lost family members. They had sacrificed everything believing they were protecting their people from a terrible enemy. Now they were being told that their enemy had never truly been their enemy at all. Their sacrifices felt meaningless. Some refused to believe the evidence. They insisted it was a trick, a conspiracy by the other side. 800 years of hatred could not be erased overnight. There would be those who clung to the old ways simply because change was too painful, Commander. Therese resigned his commission. He came to the cadets to tell them in person. His uniform was already packed away. He could not bring himself to serve a military that had been built on a lie. "I do not know who I am anymore," he admitted. "Everything I believed, everything I fought for, it was all false." Alina understood his pain. "That does not mean your service was worthless," she said. "You protected the people under your command. You acted with honor. The lie was not your fault." Therese shook his head. "But what do I do now?" "Help build something better," Alina suggested. "There is going to be a joint defense council formed by both empires. They will need officers who understand both sides. Officers who have seen the truth and accepted it." Thyres considered this for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. "Perhaps that is the answer. I cannot change the past, but maybe I can help shape the future." News of what the human cadets had accomplished spread far beyond the 2 empires. Other species, other governments, other civilizations across the galaxy took notice. The humans from Earth had arrived at the Academy as distrusted outsiders from a death world. Now they were being talked about everywhere. Earth received its first formal invitation to join the Galactic Council. Not as primitives to be watched and controlled, but as full members to be respected. The message that accompanied the invitation was simple. Any species that could end an 800-year war in a single day deserved a seat at the table. Ceasefire Day arrived. In previous years, the ceremony had been about mourning the war dead as heroes of an eternal struggle. This year was different. Both sides came together to mourn their fallen not as heroes of opposing causes, but as victims of a terrible lie. For the first time, Elnorix and Kelith families shared their grief instead of directing it at each other. Admiral Corvus and High Marshal Tethan stood together on the stage. Behind them, the flags of both empires hung side by side. The sight would have been unthinkable a week ago. The Admiral spoke first. For 847 years we have fought. We have bled. We have buried our children. We told ourselves that we had no choice. We told ourselves that the enemy was evil and could never be trusted. We were wrong, the High Marshal continued. The true enemy was never each other. It was the lie that poisoned us both. Today we choose to reject that lie. Today we choose a different path. Then they called the human cadets to the stage. Alina felt her legs shaking as she walked forward. Her team walked beside her. Marcus, Amara, Jimmy, Priya, and with them came Sorvin and Eilith. Representing the alliance that had made everything possible, the Admiral addressed them directly. You came to us as strangers. You had no stake in our war. You could have stayed silent and safe. Instead, you risked your lives to bring us the truth. Why? Alina thought carefully before answering. The entire galaxy was watching. On our world, she said, we have a saying. The truth will set you free. We have learned through our own history that lies can only last for so long. Wars built on deception always eventually collapse, but usually only after causing terrible suffering. We could not watch that happen here. Not when we had the power to stop it. The High Marshal nodded slowly. You've taught us something important. Fresh eyes can see what familiar eyes have learned to ignore. Perhaps that is what we needed all along. Someone from outside to ask the questions we had stopped asking ourselves? The ceremony concluded with a moment of silence for all who had died in the war. But this time, it was not separate groups mourning their own dead. It was everyone together, united in sorrow for the 8 centuries of loss. Afterward, the cadets gathered at a viewport overlooking the assembled fleets. For the first time in living memory, Velnorix and Kelith ships flew in formation together. The weapons were powered down. Their shields were lowered. They moved through space as partners, not enemies. Sorvan and Eilith stood together, watching the ships. They had already received their new assignments. They would serve as the first officers aboard a joint patrol vessel, crewed by members of both species. It was an experiment, a test to see if former enemies could work side by side. They were determined to make it succeed. Priya had been offered a position, helping develop new medical protocols for treating both species. Her ability to understand emotions across different beings made her uniquely qualified. She had already started learning the specific biology of both the Velnorix and the Kelith. Marcus and Jimmy had been asked to help reconstruct the true histories that had been erased. There were centuries of records to sort through, lies to untangle, and truth to restore. It would be the work of a lifetime, but they were eager to begin. Amara looked at the ships, and then at her friends. Do you think it will last? She asked. The peace, I mean. Do you think it is real? Lena watched the vessels moving in their new formation. Somewhere out there, Alith's sister was safe. Probably. Looking at the same ships and feeling the same wonder. I do not know, Alina admitted. Peace is not something you achieve once and then forget about. It is a choice that has to be made every single day. Some people will not want to make that choice. There will be setbacks and difficulties. She paused, thinking about everything they had been through. The fear, the danger, the moments when they had nearly failed. But now they have the chance to choose, she continued. A week ago, they did not have that chance. The lie had taken it away from them. We gave it back. What they do with it is up to them. Behind them, the academy was already changing. New cadets were arriving, not to train for an endless war, but to prepare for something much harder. Building a lasting peace required different skills than fighting battles. It required patience, an understanding, and the willingness to see former enemies as potential friends. Among the new arrivals were more human faces than ever before. Word had spread back to Earth about what the first human cadets had accomplished. Young people from across the planet were applying to the academy in record numbers. They wanted to be part of what came next. The galaxy was watching humanity now. They had seen what these Deathworlders could do, not through violence or conquest, but through courage and compassion, and an absolute refusal to accept that things could never change. Some lessons could only come from a species that had grown up fighting their own planet for survival. A species that had faced extinction many times and had always found a way forward. A species that looked at impossible situations and asked not whether change was possible, but how to make it happen. Jimmy came to stand beside Alina. "What do we do now?" he asked. Alina smiled. It was the same question Commander Thyres had asked, and she had the same answer. "We helped build something better," she said. "We showed them that the war could end. Now we help them figure out what comes after. That is the harder part. But we are humans. Hard is what we do." The ships continued their formation flight, painting new patterns against the stars. 800 years of war had ended. A new chapter was beginning, and somewhere in that vast darkness, 5 young cadets from a death world watched the future unfold, knowing they had helped create it.